Welcome back to the Common Podcast, where we speak upon common sense and realize it really isn't that common. Guys, today we take it back to the roots. And I really do mean that. Literally, episode 1 was about this. If you're not familiar with episode 1, we talk about the 4 temperament theory. Now, we cover it briefly just to kind of set a base on what the 4 temperament theory is. And you'll catch that early on in this episode. But I invite the very first guest that ever opened up this podcast, and that's Ben Pereto. And he's a great mind, and I'm so grateful to even have met him in the past few years that I have. He's helped me develop and grow as a person, and y'all are going to see exactly what I mean in this episode. If you guys enjoyed this whole conversation, we go a little bit more depth on the whole nature versus nurture aspect of the temperaments. Extremely interesting. It is a little bit more lengthy, so I'm going to cut the intro as short as possible. I hope you all enjoy. I do want to mention one thing before I go ahead and let y'all listen to the episode. I have a new channel, and if you're interested, it's called Roger Reacts on YouTube, only YouTube. And on there, we just simply reaction videos. If you're interested, that's going to be the first link in the description. Thank you all so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Peace. We're live. Mr. Ben, welcome back to the show. It's been a while,
man?
bro.
Good to be here. Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's been a while, but a lot has changed. I'm about to have a baby boy. And
Congratulations, man.
But you've been pretty busy as always, but you got some other stuff going on now?
We might. Well, I mean, this is kind of our time off. We're still seeing if we're gonna be in Japan and Tokyo for Thanksgiving week, but we might postpone that.
Oh, wow.
Other than that, if that gets postponed, we're pretty much off until January, and we start off the year hitting it here in Houston, and then later in January, hopefully Sri Lanka, and then just go from there. So we're like in 15 countries. In the U.S., we're in about 27, 28 cities.
Just
So
traveling
right now we're
the
just
world, bro.
enjoying so we're just enjoying our time off. It's not really time off here, because we're busy focusing on clients and people we mentor and coach here. So it's still very busy, but at least we get to do it from the comfort of our home,
Yeah. That's the misconception about being self-employed, right? People think that you make your own schedule, but really you're working 24/7 is the fact of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, for sure. I mean, the good thing is that you do it in your own comfort, your own
Yeah.
kind of your own space, your own environment. So that's what's best about it.
Yeah. And you were in Canada for a while, right? Was it for a while?
Yeah. We've been there a few times actually. At one point we were in Montreal. We were in Quebec City. So that was like on the eastern side of Canada.
Mhm.
And then we've been on the western side, which is Edmonton and Calgary.
Well, the
So
eastern side has majority of the population. Is that correct or no? Like near the Toronto
um,
area? That's what I heard. I mean, I've never been.
yeah, I think from my understanding, from what I've heard, it's like more popular, like that's where people want to go.
Hmm.
But from what I've been seeing, um, Calgary and Edmonton, they every time I'm there, they make references to Houston, and they're like, "Oh, we're your twin city," and
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
understand the reference, and it's because they're like the oil cities.
Oh, okay.
Calgary and Edmonton are twin cities, and they mirror Houston. They're
Mm.
like so a lot of people move there for oil and gas.
Oh,
Yeah, so apparently they're very familiar with Houston, um,
that's
in that
cool.
nature.
And it's
Yeah.
cold over there, right? I would assume.
It was some days. It wasn't as cold when we were there. In Quebec, it was raining, but what tripped me out in what was it, Calgary? It was 11 o'clock at night, bro, and the light was still out. So that was pretty trippy.
Yeah, because it's so high and it's towards the top part of the
Yeah,
earth, I
bro.
guess. Yeah.
So we'd come out like of a conference and it was still bright outside, and I was like, "What the heck, man?"
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with all that being said, let's go ahead and start jumping into the topic that I
All
have for
right.
you today. We're gonna be talking about the theory that you and I both subscribe to. Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about it, but the theory of the four temperaments, right? The four
All right.
temperaments is we've talked about it before, probably like twice, right, on the podcast. But
Yeah.
the four temperament theories was founded. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong at any of these facts, right? But it was founded in 400 BC, right? Like before the Bible, before all this stuff. Well, initially, right, by Socrates.
By yeah, but also by Hippocrates.
Okay. And
So
then
so
it was
it was
retouched by
essentially
Galen,
done.
right?
Yeah, essentially it was done for medical reasons. They were trying to correlate if I guess the simplest way I explain it is they were trying to find a correlation whether medication affects people different ways based on who you are.
Hmm.
Which the answer is yeah,
Yeah.
and it gets into addiction and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though, being that it was so early on in time, right? So
Yeah,
um, those guys are very, profound people just because they were thinking about those things at the time. And I mean, you
yeah,
kind of have to get things wrong in order to find, the correct thing. So at that time, all there's a bunch of speculation, all that, but that was the original, the origin of, the four temperaments. I kind of just want to say that just because before we get into it, I want to let people know how long this theory has lasted, you know,
yeah, yeah,
because people try to debunk a lot of things. And when it comes to the four temperaments, um, people would try to debunk it. But for me personally, I always go based on what survives the test of time, right? And so when people try to debunk the
yeah,
Bible, I always say this: well, the Bible's been around for thousands of years. You've been around for
yeah,
20 years. You know what I mean? And you think you know
yeah, for
better.
sure. I do mention with people that like if anyone's trying to ever debunk the like the four temperaments or any, I mean, it's literally like the foundation of modern day psychology. So
Hmm.
it's anyone who tries to trump it or disagree with it, they just don't know like how widely in effect it is right now. Like every major company, every major organization is going to use it. Someone listening probably um, has had it done to them in their job. They just don't know about it because they
Yeah.
don't remember. They didn't pay attention.
Hmm.
Most orientations are going to do it. Some companies are going to tell you they're doing it because they want to teach it to you or assess you. And some companies they're never going to share it with the employees, but they're doing it at a management level anyway.
Well, yeah, because it's a risk, right? Because marginalizing you could be discrimination, right? It can be called as discrimination. Like, oh, they don't want me because I'm this type of person.
Well, the way and the when they do share with the employees, it's to try to get them to understand the way they learn
Hmm.
and the way they communicate. So, for example, there are some hospitals that they'll label your name badges and like with colors. And so,
Wow.
imagine if I'm walking down the hallway and I know those colors. I'm like, oh, there goes Roger. He's green, and that means whatever the heck
Yeah.
your temperament is. But that'll help me interact with you. You
Yeah.
know, if I'm your manager and I'm sending out an email, I look at my little cheat sheet and I'm like, oh, Roger's green, so that means he's this temperament, and I know I should customize my email according to your temperament.
Yeah.
So I guess when people don't understand it, they think they're being marginalized, but they're not. The whole point of temperaments is for conflict resolution
Yep.
and just for better engagement, so that there's lesser misunderstandings. And so most banks will do it. They'll tell you about it in the beginning, so they want you to understand yours. When I think most times when companies don't share it with you, is they're trying to place you somewhere.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, most companies, after you've already accepted a position, like there's no going back on a position, obviously, but then they teach that to you,
Hmm.
hoping that you better interact with everybody else or know yourself.
Yeah, but if there's like a limited specific job position and then you don't get it, they're not gonna let you know, right? Like, that's what I'm talking about. Where,
Yeah, sometimes they use it for headhunting, like someone's trying to fill a specific position,
Hmm.
and they're using that to break down candidates.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, in that case, they're not going to teach it to the person. But in general, onboarding in some companies, they just teach it to everybody. So the companies will hire either a third party to come in and teach it, or they will spend hundreds to thousands of dollars training an in-house person to get certified or learn it, or like crash course them into it, and then that person teaches it during orientation.
Mm, okay.
That's just like one of those things that you forget about also, because sometimes when I have conversations with people like this, then they're like, you know what? Now that I think about it, my job did do it,
Mm-hmm.
and they forgot about it. They
Yeah.
never used it.
One thing that I like that you mentioned about the temperaments, it's all about learning um, patterns, right? It's
Yeah,
learning patterns. That's a big factor in interacting with people, right? Because you kind of already know what to expect when you meet a certain type of person. Obviously it's not black and white, it's not routine to the T, right? But you get a grasp of what you can kind of expect when you meet certain types of people once you learn these temperaments, and that allows you to have these patterns in order to sort yourself out. Like you said, given the example of, if I'm a manager, I know, okay, this person is this temperament, I can approach them in this way typically, right? It doesn't always, it's not 100%. And that's the thing that also people try to use to debunk temperaments. Like they think it's 100% correct when obviously there are some variables. And then, you know, um, there people can also be misreading you, or, there can be,
correct.
there's other factors that tie into temperaments, but typically it works in a very pattern way.
Yeah, you can say like, I would say, if we're talking like the poster person for that temperament,
Don't
yeah, we can
don't name any
understand.
names now.
No, no, I'm just saying like when you have like the model of like an original, let's say dolphin, which would be a sanguine, or a choleric, a shark. You can have like, I guess, the original template, and then everyone that you meet, they may not fulfill all of those things. They might have overcome them. They might have never developed those traits. So there's a lot of factors, and it all boils down to nature versus nurture, also refinement levels. Um, we can have a room filled with 10 people of the same temperament, and they're still all different
Yep.
because we can't control their upbringing, we can't control their trauma, their mentorship, the demands of their jobs, the demands of their household, their relationships. It's been tweaked so much, but yeah, like there would be like a template, an original template, but everyone doesn't fit that.
Mm-hmm.
um, and that's why in the beginning it's more, yes, we do assess patterns, but if I understand the profile's emotional needs, that's how I best understand them.
Yeah.
So everyone, regardless of your, I guess you could say, your background, upbringing, what you've gone through, people are still gonna kind of share those emotional needs, and then they prove them through patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah. Well, when we start to get more specific with the person, I think it comes down to what you said, refinement, right? How,
yeah.
how mature this person is or immature this person is, and what things have kind of cultivated this person's personality, whether they're to be a positive aspect of this temperament or a negative aspect of this temperament, right? Because each temperament has positives and negatives. They all have pros and cons, and based on your development and your upbringing, it'll flourish what either or pros or cons of that temperament.
Correct. So it would be more like strengths and weaknesses, and then depending what you've overcome, like someone may not know something is a weakness, or they might be functioning as strength and they don't even know it's a strength.
Mm.
So it gets super complicated, but and it everyone's different. Everyone's super different. And
Well,
so there's like no cookie cutter way to explain it. I think that's what people want sometimes.
yeah.
and there's no way. Like every individual is so unique, but yet still falls within like certain parameters
Hmm.
that are explainable.
Yeah. A good example of what you were talking about, how you may have a strength and not even know it's a strength. I remember when I was a kid, I was super specific in my storytelling when I would, try to tell people things, and especially with my mom, which my mom is a sanguine, and my secondary is melancholic. So I was very detailed in all my storytellings, and she would get frustrated, right? And she would be just spit it out
Yeah,
already, like leave out all the deets, like just get straight to the point. And I thought that was a flaw of mine because of that. It's like, oh man, like what's wrong with me? I can't just spit it out. And what the
yeah,
reality was is that maybe that was something that she got annoyed to, but other people might appreciate that, and I just didn't realize it
yeah.
at the time that that was a strength of mine, but it was just being projected to the wrong person.
Correct, correct.
Hmm.
So on that note, I have a mentor of mine that says, how does he put it? Our opposites. He says our opposites. They smoothen our edges. He goes, but our similars, they polish us.
Mm.
So sometimes, because we can't use an experience like that, like what you went through, to say, well, I don't want to be around Sangans, no, saying we still need our opposites, because they're going to like smoothen us on stuff we're not good at. You know what I mean? So essentially, I would still want you to learn to get to the point, right? What if it's an emergency and you're that annoying 911 caller that doesn't get to the point? Yeah, they're gonna hang up on you, right?
Yeah.
Um, but only someone of your same temperament can truly refine you.
Mm.
So I think one of the issues there, like an upbringing, is back to unknown, not knowing our strengths or not realizing it's a strength. Is you won't realize it's a strength until you meet someone that already is using it as a strength.
Mm.
So if you were to continue like that young Roger, and never have met another melancholic, like he doesn't. It's a eagle raised with chickens.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you never know you fly, and the whole time you fly.
Yeah.
So that, for me, that's kind of like the principle of discipleship. Like you have to find. I always tell anyone in whatever temperament they're, your obligation is to find someone of your temperament higher than you, more educated than you, more advanced than
More
you. So
refined.
that way, correct. So that way, some like your potentials before you've seen it,
Mm.
and then you have the obligation to find someone less refined than you, so which typically sometimes annoys us, but we forget that that's who we were and that's where we were, and then our obligation is to pull them up to where we're at.
Oh yeah, 100%. That all that you just said was 100% true, especially that last part where you said we find the people that we come from annoying, but it's actually we are responsible. Like it's our due diligence to go back and bring people up from where we came from. And a lot
Correct.
of people don't like to do that, but I think it's our duty as, just human beings to do that, to teach the next generation or the people that are coming up behind us. I think Orson Welles, he was a great mind in the 1900s, says that we owe, how does he say it? He calls himself the obedient servant, and he says we owe to the very people that give us what we. I forgot how he quoted it, but basically, in essence, what we're talking about right now is,
Yeah,
yeah, your knowledge that you've gained is nothing if you don't pay due diligence back to where you got it from, and obviously that's where you come from.
yeah, yeah, for sure, man. So yeah, I think that's real important, because then we get so focused on growing, moving up, and we're not growing others. Both, I apply both. I mean, on the secular side with business, and then spiritually the same. I always give people the example of Jesus. He discipled 12, and then in examples like in the Garden of Gethsemane, he goes to pray to the Father. So then he's tied up in discipleship, and he's tied down in discipleship.
Hmm.
So you always have to be. If we were talking about arms, you have to be connected on both ends.
Mm.
It's being pulled up and then pulling someone up.
Yeah, that's so true, right? Because if you're only trying to bring people up and you're not seeking to grow yourself either, like you lose sight of your mentors. The quickest way to rehabilitate yourself to a certain level is who you surround yourself with, right? So if you keep surrounding yourself with lower leveled people, you're eventually going to work your
Correct.
way back down. And so
Correct.
yeah, so it's very important where you're putting your energy, your time, and your focus, and how you balance it from growing and also bringing people up. I've talked about this on the podcast before too, right? Where people would try to help other people, but they're not ready yet. And what ends up
Oh yeah.
happening is that they're looking for kind of sympathy, I guess you can say, or people to relate to. Is like, these are the reasons, or these people have the same problems as me. Oh, we can relate. It must not be that bad of a issue, right? They're looking more for sympathy whenever they do that. So I think what's hard about that situation is really assessing where you're at and knowing whether you
Do,
need.
do you mean like because there's this phrase, this quote that a saying that misery needs company. Is it kind of like that?
I'm sorry, what was that
What you're
again?
trying to say? Misery needs company.
Misery needs company. Yes, that's 100%. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And what I'm trying to get to is like really assessing yourself and realizing if you need more mentors in your life, or at this point in your life, do you need to help people out more, right? Like
Oh,
that's a
okay.
hard
Yeah.
thing to assess too, and some people get it wrong, and it really, they shoot themselves in the foot by but doing that equation.
Like premature helping people out prematurely. You mean?
Hmm. Well, like sanguines would probably do that, because they
Oh yeah, yeah.
they act impulsively. Um,
Yeah,
and
that can be true, and it goes back to where who are you actively seeking out?
mm,
Who is actively edifying you or molding you or working with you? And then I think that when we I think that's why it has to be connected on both ends. Like one can't be without the other. I can't be so focused on discipleship so long because then I never put it into effect, and then by putting it into effect and discipling others or mentoring someone else, then I am putting into practice what I'm learning,
mm,
and then I also can't be discipling mentoring someone else without being mentored because then I'm not being refined myself.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I think a
they
great
both have to be
analogy.
done.
I think a great analogy for that is planting seeds, but never going back to water them, right? If you continue to plant seeds
Yeah,
and you're just focusing on planting seeds, you plant 1,000 seeds, but you forgot to water the first one you planted. It's never gonna grow, right? So it's like you plant seeds,
yeah.
you have to go back to water them, then eventually you can plant more seeds and water them, and just continue in that process. But you need to water those seeds, and kind of, that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, but like what you were mentioning, I mean, I guess yeah, there could be people that uh, they feel sympathy for other people, so they're trying to relate. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, that makes them feel good about themselves. The fact that there's other miserable people, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
So,
yeah. It's
and how it would be affected is if they haven't overcame it, if they haven't overcome whatever situation they're in, there's nothing really they have to help.
Listen, guys, are y'all tired of being fat and unhealthy? Look, I feel you. I've struggled with weight loss for a majority of my life, but I recently lost 32 pounds. I want to tell y'all exactly how I did it. I changed my diet. I ate a little bit healthier. I know how hard that can be with so much convenient fast food restaurants, convenient grab and go foods that you can just pick up and go. But I want to show y'all a way where y'all can stay convenient and eat a bit healthier. That's why I want to tell y'all about my good friends at Primitive Eats. It's a local, homegrown, small business that is a meal prep company. And they are derived off the paleo diet. Really quickly, paleo is just a natural way of eating food, taking out simple carbs, sticking to the earth. Okay. It is very good for you. It's very healthy for you, and you can support a local small business. It's always great. So if you're in the Los Fresnos, Brownsville, or Harlingen, San Benito area, Go check them out. They have plans where you can buy for the full week. They will deliver it for you quick, easy, and go. And it's super delicious. They support the podcast. I support them. Go check them out. And if you don't want to get their meal plan, listen, check out their Instagram. That is Primitive Eats 90. I'm going to leave it in the description. If you're not going to follow them for the meal preps, follow them for their memes because their memes are hilarious. Also, little quick fun fact, they do raffles, which I recently won concert tickets on their page. True story. Go check them out. I support Primitive Eats. Primitive Eats supports the podcast, and we love them. Go check them out. Yeah. Another thing I want to go back to is you had mentioned how our opposites kind of help us out, even though it might annoy us sometimes. I found that I spent majority of my focus, and since I've learned the whole temperaments thing, learning more about sanguines because that's my opposite, and I typically
Yeah,
find those type of people not great to hang around with. I kind of find them annoying. So obviously, I want to better myself. I want to refine myself. So I need to learn how to interact with those people, and part of that is being having humility and learning where my faults are at and how I can be more open to those type of people. But yeah, I think that's very important. And I think that people, when they learn temperaments, they might go about it the wrong way, where they only try to surround themselves with their temperaments, and that's not
with
what
their
this is
similar.
for. This is to
Yeah,
help you grow in all aspects and help you in business avenues or relationship avenues and all these things.
yeah, yeah. Because as a leader, you're gonna have to lead all four.
Hmm.
So you have to understand all four. As a leader, you're gonna have to resolve conflicts with all four. You're gonna have to go to toe to toe with all four. You're gonna have to love on all four. So we really can't take that. Yeah, we kind of do incline to a preference. Like, I mean, I have to admit, like with sanguines, I do um, have to really gather patience.
Yeah.
I've learned, like, I guess the old me. I mean, I wouldn't have paid them too much time.
Yeah.
But I've learned, and a lot of, but I the reason I've learned though is because a lot of, I call them principles, the people that I've served under
Hmm.
in leadership, a lot of my principles have been sanguines. So that's it's different to look down on your opposite when you have an option to serve alongside of them, and it's different to have someone of them above you that you
Hmm.
have to humble yourself to serve.
Oh yeah.
So that's a total difference. Like someone that you deem beneath you, you're like, I don't have to deal with them, but
Hmm.
all of a sudden when they're above you, you're like, crap, I have to adapt. So yeah, it's just adapting, and then that'll make you just more holistic in general. I
Hmm.
mean, so it's an added benefit to you once you accomplish it or do it effectively. But yeah, it goes back again to knowing their emotional needs, and that's why I like the dealing with the four temperaments. It allows us to understand why people do what they do, why they react the way they react, why they understand what they understand,
Hmm.
and so when you do it effectively, I remember a long time ago, one of the principals I served, they said, "Wait, I thought you were a dolphin." I was like, "No, I mean, I've just learned how to adapt."
Hmm.
So, but obviously, that was kind of a compliment because I was doing it effectively.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it goes again to adapting to their emotional needs, always trying to fulfill their emotional needs. Which for Sanguine, the emotional needs are going to be fun and recognition. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Sanguines don't like monotony. They don't like routines. You know, they're not a fan of boredom. They like
yeah,
excitement
yeah.
and stuff like that.
And it
Um,
really boils down to commitment issues. All of those.
I think well, I think the important thing to know about, like, when you're going with your opposite, I guess we use that word, is to realize that they have something to offer that they have better than you, right? Like, there is great
Correct.
potential in this person, although it might be your opposite temperament. You need to realize that they have something great to offer.
So, and speaking, giving that example, so the principles that I've served, like leaders that I've served for like long periods of time, I have to understand when they're sanguines that they are a greater influencer than I am.
Mm.
I might think of myself as a good influencer,
Mm-hmm.
but mine is more studied, learned, and I had to understand it. It took me longer to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And on their bad day, they're still an influencer. You know, like
Yeah, because just because you've done more of the like hands-on work doesn't mean that you're going to be more effective, right? That means that's what it
right,
took you in order to reach your potential of effectiveness, but it doesn't mean that you're going to reach the effectiveness as a sanguine or, someone else in their field of work.
correct. So I might be put in a position to where I need to use uh, s- those sanguine characteristics and strengths. Um, and I might be able to use them for a short period of time before I burn out or just get exhausted or
Mm,
emotionally overwhelmed or whatever. But I mean, I can use them. I mean, imagine that I decide to become a coach. Like I have to use those.
yeah.
Imagine that I'm at a concert and I'm the opener. I'm the MC that's gonna go up there and just like light it up. I have to use that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to learn from those principles that they're I might be an influencer also, but they're quicker igniters. They ignite a crowd more. They can control a crowd better. They're more spontaneous than I am. They're going to be more lively for longer periods of time than I am.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I have to understand those things that they're going to be the life of the party. That's not me. I can be, but it's not who I am just naturally out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just woke up a couple hours ago. Like I'm not like the most lively I could be. Last night I was mentoring like I was doing some coaching sessions with like four people, and I was like super fast, dude, like going at it, like super excited, and doing it. But that's not me, like 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And even a sanguine doesn't do it 24/7, but they definitely do it for longer periods than I do.
Yeah, it's a lot more constant.
Yeah,
I think that's a perfect way to segue this conversation where I want to lead it to is the whole nature versus nurture side. And what I spoke to you on the phone yesterday was, is it predestined or not? And because you talked about how sanguines naturally are a lot more spontaneous than you, they're a lot more colorful and loud and full of energy. But obviously, like you just said, you can bring that out at times too, but it just doesn't last as long. It's not in your nature to have that out. I had this conversation with somebody else about temperaments, and he asked me if I think that the nature side or the nurture side, which one's stronger out of the two. And me personally, I believe that we will always kind of fall back on our nature whenever we're out of like our prime time.
yeah,
So for me, I answered nature. Like you always fall back on your nature because I think that the nurturement, although there can be, some pretty crazy moments that can alter your views, I think that
yeah,
takes a lot more discipline, nurturement, right?
correct.
Assessing yourself in a certain way. Like let's say I want to be more of like a sanguine type, right? That's going to take me more discipline in order to accomplish that than it is to accomplish my nature, which is caloric, you know, aspects.
Yeah, on the like you as a cleric, yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't think that it's that simple just
Mm-hmm.
because like nature, like we gave an example earlier, nature versus nurture, which one is, I guess the question is which one is stronger. It all depends on which one's been conditioned more. uh so I guess when we think of nature we assume that we're functioning in our nature, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. I think to answer it that way, we're assuming that we've been longer functioning in our nature, therefore that's why it's stronger.
Mm.
But no, what if, like you, back to your example, you're like choleric, melancholic, but what if you were only for decades exposed to sanguines?
Mm.
So therefore, which one is stronger, the nurture side? because you haven't been exposed to anyone else who fits your nature.
But
You know what I mean?
do you think if, like, let's say I was in that environment for, let's say, 2 decades of just sanguines, and within a 3 year span after that, I was surrounded around my temperaments. You think that the nature side will overwhelmingly take over me
Absolutely.
in that 3 year span in comparison to the two
It,
decades?
it could now, but it's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, like, that's why when you were talking about like predestination and stuff like that, that's still a choice. You know what I mean? What if you're so lost in your nurture at that point that you reject anyone else that resembles your nature? Like, that would literally be a choice.
Yeah.
And anyways, in that aspect, there, I think two outcomes happen when I've dealt with kids, or when we've advocated for kids in school and stuff. My wife and I, and we meet situations like that where, like, one of the parents, maybe a single parent home, or we've even worked with one young man who, it was so hilarious because his mom thought that when he was being basically a Sangan, that he was high.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, no, like, and I knew what this guy was on, and so I had to tell the mom, no, no, you don't understand. That's who he really is. No, 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 it's because he's on his phone and he's doing these crazy laughs and he's on some type of drug. And I was like, no, no. Look, let me tell you the secret. When he's quiet, he's on drugs. Like, and she didn't know, bro. So she was so conditioned to him being high that when he was not high, she
Oh,
thought he was
yeah.
high. So it was hilarious. But what I'm saying about that is um, that sometimes, speaking about a family, there's a kid who doesn't, because he didn't fit the profile of neither his mom or dad.
Mm.
So he's like the oddball there. And what's important to understand, that one of two things happens: either that kid is not embraced, or not, or completely misunderstood, or like, oh my god, you're just a problem child, and he continues in his nature, or he adapts, or sometimes in like people that I've met, like your case, maybe the parents' nature was so overwhelmingly strong that, what if you were the same nature as your parent, but then you're like, I don't like the results that my parents are giving me, so I have to find something else. And you slowly begin to condition the opposite and learn things. And it doesn't mean that you're the opposite. You might be the similar profile as your parent, but all of a sudden you have to adult faster. You start parenting your parent. You become the provider at a young age. You become the mother or the father of your single parent or whatever parent at home.
Mm.
And so all of a sudden you start finding disciplines at a younger age that typically you may have not needed to have been introduced until an older age.
Yeah.
So even though you may be the same profile as your parent, but you see the negative results of that profile just functioning unchecked.
I hear you. Now, like, the only thing I would say to kind of combat that is I feel that people, especially nowadays, we're seeing this a lot. It's very prevalent now. People that have identity issues fight against their nature. They fight against the grain. And you see this a lot, especially with younger kids who rebel against their parents, right? Because they're obviously, their parents are going against their nature, and then they're trying to rebel against their parents' nature, and then they're like, okay, well, who am I? And then they're trying to go out there and figure themselves out, but it's just a catastrophe because they've never identified with anybody close to them, and they feel like, oh, well, I fit with this group, and like, no, I fit with that group, and they really don't know because they failed, or maybe not them, right? But maybe their nature failed, or the people around them, sorry, their nurture failed to identify them to someone or something, a type of group, a tribe.
Yeah, yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's combating what I said, because I think that reinforces more what I said. Because if they're rebelling against like the authority figure or the parent, again, it's because they disagree with how that profile's functioning. But I guess what I'm trying to explain here is that it's not necessarily, if we're talking about a family home, it's not always that the kid is an opposite of the parent. I think your argument only works if we're assuming that the parent and the child are opposite.
Hmm.
But what if they're not?
Yeah.
What if they're the same? It should result in a proper discipleship or mentorship.
Yeah.
But what if it doesn't, because that the authoritative figure is not refined, so
Hmm.
therefore may have nothing to provide or nurture, and so the identity crisis there would be that the child, whether the same or opposite, says, "I never want to be like that.
Yeah.
I never want to live like that. Um, I don't want to have those results. I want nothing to do with that type of life or whatever." And so then does everything to do the opposite.
Yeah. So, well, that's going to affect people with different temperaments differently, right? Because
Correct.
if a caloric is in that situation, typically, right, not always the case, they will say something like that. Well, I don't want to be like this type of person. I want to be better. But if you meet maybe someone like a phlegmatic, or an urchin, or maybe even a dolphin, right? Probably I would say dolphin and phlegmatic, definitely phlegmatic. They might approach it in a very different way, like in a
Well, I'll
very.
tell you one we dealt with recently. That's why everyone will react differently, right? But some of the principles will be the same whether they express them or not.
Mm,
But if you dig deep enough, see, like with an extrovert, I won't have to dig deep enough for them to like tell you the reason, but I will have to dig deep with an introvert to for them to like release the reason,
mm,
because it was more like of a felt thing that they're functioning in until they finally spit it out,
mm,
and it costs them more to spit it out. So there's been situations, to get to the one I'm trying to get to, where a sanguine choleric says, "Well, I don't want to be like my dad. Look at where we live and look at the car he drives, and I want more than that." And the argument there was, well, your dad, it's not that he's struggling. He's comfortable. He has an income that is steady. He's not failing. He's not living paycheck to paycheck. He is comfortable and doesn't require any more luxuries.
mm.
However, and he has a good work ethic.
Yeah, well,
You
his
might
priorities are different, right? Like his priorities could be on his
correct.
family and maintenance, and
And now to the son, it was like you might be more quote unquote woke or want more things and have bigger ambitions, but your work ethic sucks. Like,
mm,
so you're not even going to get to what he has. You're
mm,
complaining about what your dad has, and you're not even going to make it there because
mm,
of your crappy work ethic.
mm,
You might now have a better paying job, but you're still not going to be there because of a lot of different disciplines that you lack that he already has. You just don't like where he parked it, but you can't even park it there even if you wanted to.
That's
So now,
good.
but that's on a sanguine choleric, right? But now recently we had a session with what would be a phlegmatic melancholic, and the phlegmatic the phlegmatic melancholic, basically, that's what I'm telling you. Like, trauma is a big motivating factor, bro. Like, it comes to a point where you just fed up with your surroundings, or you assimilate them. And if you assimilate them, well, you're not going to complain about it. You
Yeah.
just like kind of live in misery about it. So, this phlegmatic, in a public in a public coaching session, basically said, "I need help." Like, without going into detail, what was said, he basically said, "I need help," and it tripped me out because I knew her profile, and I was like, "What the heck? How did this person like actually ask for help in a public thing?"
Yeah.
It's not the nature I was expecting. So I made it a point. I made it a point to engage later, and through their leadership say, "Hey, we need to set up a session. Let's set up a session, and let's get something in order." So the whole point was that the trauma of the individual ends up being, I've seen what this type of lifestyle leads to. I've seen what this type of discipline leads to, or the lack of, and I'm realizing I'm not at my potential,
Hmm.
and I don't want to live like that. I need to reach my potential. And okay, well, what's your potential, or what do you think your potential is? Well, I've been talking to other people, and they're sharing stuff with me that I never knew existed.
Mm.
And then they begin to analyze. And that's why on the melancholic side, their analysis of the situation is going to be a little deeper, because then they start sizing up the entire situation. So I think that's like one of the most powerful ones. A frustrated melancholic that is like determined to change, because they're going to analyze all of it. And it's similar. It puts you in your situation. So it's kind of like your similar situation, um, where the parent is a sanguine, and they're like, look, there's no success in this. There's no success in that. Um, I'm tired of basically losing, and I'm paraphrasing to protect the information, right? But I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of always living like this. I'm tired of not having these certain things. And then I meet people, and at a point, the person begins to justify the situation. Well, I thought that was normal. I thought because of who I am and where I come from and my current situation, that that's what I'm supposed to live.
Mm.
But then I met other people in my same situation with my current, like my actual setbacks, same setbacks, and they have a different quality of life. Like, what the heck?
Mm.
So that point, when they met other people with their same circumstances, but a different quality of life or different perspective of life, that triggered something,
Mm.
because they already had to become comfortable in saying, well, I guess this is how it has to be.
Mm. Yeah, the interesting thing about that is that when you find someone of your temperament and you see the potential that they've withheld, it kind of like lights up something in your brain, right? Like that's happened to me a lot with the people that I look up to and some mentors that I've picked up along, my short-lived 26 years of life. Whenever I see somebody is like that I truly admire, and this is like it doesn't take a year or 2 years. It's almost like whether it's the first interaction or within a week's time, like it just clicks and you want to be around that person. You want to learn from that person. And yeah, I find that phenomenon super great.
And yeah, it's pretty interesting. But it doesn't have to be your same temperament, because imagine that my friend is an opposite temperament, but our circumstances are the same. What if the circumstances are, let's just go super basic. What if we both don't have a job,
Mm.
and then I see them get a job, and I thought, oh, I wasn't in the capacity to get a job yet, and neither were they. But then they get it. So on those things, it doesn't necessarily have to do with temperament. It does on my reaction, right? On how I'm perceiving it,
Mm.
how I'm soaking it in. But it's not always necessary, because in this situation, I'm sure, on the person we were coaching, I'm sure in that crowd that they were in, there was different temperaments, but it was the same circumstances, and they were like, what? So sometimes our opposites, if we have an opposite in temperament but in similar circumstance, that can nudge us or push
Mm.
us. Well, how do they do it?
Yeah.
Like, what do they have that I don't have that made them do it? And it might be something connected to emotional needs, which is going to affect our perspective on the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. It starts to get tricky like the more we start to dive into it, right?
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, because the emotional needs is a big part too, right? Because like let's say in that situation that you're talking about, a sanguine is obviously, or someone who's extroverted is obviously gonna be better like at interviewing situations or going out and getting a job, as opposed to the introverted types, which are gonna be like, well, I'm not good at all those stuff. I can't get the job, right? But like you said, it could motivate the introverted, which is, the phlegmatic and the melancholic, to be like, well, they did it. They're in the same situation. Their parents make the same as my parents and whatnot. Like, I need to push myself to attain those things.
Yeah. Understanding your opposites helps you assess what you need, or what you need to do to engage that thing. It could be as, yeah, if it was a job, there's a general, like, I guess you could say, a general way we think of what is required at a job interview. You know what I mean? Um, but I think that would also be it would be affected by what job it is,
Mm,
right? If it's a singing like job, well then I need to go in there with those type of characteristics, right? But if it was, but the reason, even though I mean extroverts would be good at first impressions, uh, we could also misread what was required or the vibe that was required in that interview.
mm.
I mean, what if it was a chemist job? You know, I have a friend that's a chemist, and what if his overexcitement and over enthusiasm is taken as a safety risk? You know, like this guy's gonna be too distracted. You know,
Yeah.
um, so, but yeah, it, it's super complicated because it depends what you're doing, where you're doing it, why you're doing it. You know,
Yeah.
like
Context
that.
is
That's where
important.
it gets so. Yeah, that's where it gets super tricky. Um, but yeah.
Now you've obviously traveled a lot in, the country, out of country, and you do a lot of coaching, you meet a lot of people, and kind of going back to nature versus nurture, is it important for you to focus immediately on the nature or nurture, or just what they present, or what do you find most importantly? Because there is two sides, right? Because you kind of, when you did the seminar here where I live, you talked about how, what we presented could possibly be the nurture side, but you also wanted to figure out the nature side.
Correct.
So,
I think when we're trying to well, so let me kind of go back to how it works. You meet somebody, right, and you try to determine whether they're extrovert or introvert. They might be a hybrid, but we're more focused on extrovert, introvert at first.
mhm,
Because if I find out they're like a double extroverted based on the primary secondary, then I can delete two, right?
yeah,
If I find out they're like fully introvert, then I can delete the extroverts. And then when I assess nature versus nurture in the beginning, I'm not trying to go too deep. I'm more trying to figure out is are they being that naturally right now, or are they trying to be something according to what they think they have to be because of who I am or where they're at, or that's where I kind of are they doing something they've practiced, or are they being who they really are? But I'm not diving too much into the nature versus nurture as far as their trauma, where they've been, their upbringing, because obviously I don't have the time. I only have about 5 minutes to do this.
mhm,
So, but then I do, so I will focus more on the refinement
okay,
and less on the nature versus nurture, even though I still have it in that order. I still do the nature versus nurture first, but very briefly. I won't park it on the nature versus nurture. I'll park on the refinement. And on the refinement is like how experienced or how mature are they in that temperament?
mm,
Are they well cultured? Are they mature? Have they what is their experience? You can kind of tell when someone's very well educated and living out like more extreme potentials and who they are, or by the way they speak, by the way they eat. So if I'm in a business meeting over lunch or dinner, like I'm like, this guy can't hold a fork right. You know, he's unrefined in that area, right? Or little itty bitty stuff, how they react to what I said or what other people say, how they listen, what their distractions are in a meeting.
okay,
So there's a lot of things, but yeah, we're gonna focus on refinement versus unrefinement, and
okay.
that just can be like being adulted or cultured or
Mm.
things of that sort.
Do you think that certain temperaments are more telling than others, especially, or do you, especially in first interactions, or do you think it really comes down to if they're a double extrovert, double introvert?
No, I think they're all telling. Now, what I think you're kind of leaning towards would be, we always say, if you don't know what an extrovert's day was like, you weren't listening because he
Mm,
was spitting it out the whole time. And then if you don't know what an introvert's day was like, you haven't asked.
yeah.
But as far as telling, as far as signs, everyone has the signs. Like even if even if we ordered everyone to be 100% silent, like there would still be signs.
Body language, certain
Yeah,
mannerisms. Yeah, I agree with that.
correct.
I will say though, I think that melancholics could possibly be like the trickiest ones as far as like first interactions. I think sanguines on the opposite side of the spectrum would be a little bit more telling. Me personally, that's what I've known, um, because because melancholics, because phlegmatics and melancholics are pretty similar in introvertedness. So you might confuse a melancholic I'm talking about like a 5 minute interaction, right? You
Yeah,
might, or you might think that they're goal oriented and they're trying to pay attention because they want to be successful. So you can kind of confuse them with a caloric or something like that. That's me personally, right? Obviously, that's what I found that melancholics are a little bit harder to read. I think sanguines are the easiest to read just because, they won't even let you
yeah,
talk. They're going to talk over you and, all those things.
yeah. I mean, I think if we were having a conversation, yeah, that would apply. But like, what if again, it depends on what my access is to. What if I'm looking at a band? I'm not conversating with them. So it would go to body language, mannerisms.
Mm-hmm.
What if we're all eating and we're not actually talking, like different things like that. So then you just do things to provoke them or to, like, I guess, prod them, socially speaking. But yeah, and it also depends on you as the one trying to perceive everything, on which one. Like, I'm at, like, for instance, me or yourself, you might be good at always identifying a sanguine, a dolphin, because it bothers you. Like,
Yeah, yeah, that is true. Like honestly,
you
right?
know,
Because negatives are always stronger than positives, right? And so we're
yeah,
all like, as it's in our nature to highlight the negatives, so to speak. So
yeah,
you're gonna highlight the opposite. For me, it's sanguine. So I totally get that, and I had already thought about that as well.
yeah, for sure. Like, we were in a group coaching session not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, and you're right about what you're saying. I asked, tell me one good thing about the team, and everyone took forever. But then when you ask for the negative things, like, everyone has something to say.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
yeah, we,
no,
we tend to attack that first.
yeah, we definitely do highlight the opposites because, well, my wife Sarah, she's phlegmatic, right? It's crazy because we're opposites, right? So I'm
Yeah,
caloric, primarily caloric. She's primary phlegmatic, and she can highlight the, like, she thinks these guys are like douchebags, or like guy or girl or douchebags, the caloric types, the ones that are a little bit
yeah,
more selfish and self centered and goal oriented. It's like, oh, they're they feel they I think they're stuck up, right? Is she won't say it in
yeah,
those things, but you can kind of read that off of her. And obviously with me, I already said that I kind of highlight the sanguine, so I just thought I'd say that.
yeah. And then, like, with a choleric, it'll be one of two. Either they'll focus on attacking the sanguine, or they can focus on attacking the phlegmatic. It's more of who's hindered you. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does
So
make
same
sense.
with same with the phlegmatic. They're gonna highlight the one that's hindered them the most, because I mean, another opposite for them would also be the sanguine.
Yeah.
But maybe in cases like that, what if they can both be hindering, but what if I just identify the hindrance from one and not the other?
Oh yeah, I think that's definitely the case because no, that has to be the case, right? Because my
Which leads
my
us to blind spots.
because my wife's family is primarily sanguines, right? Like a lot of her
Yeah.
family members are sanguines, majority of them. So
So then she would be conditioned to
she would be
sanguine.
conditioned to the sanguines, but still, highlight some negative aspects and maybe identify them as the caloric types, like the extroverted.
That too.
You know,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, and so, well, it's crazy because, like, being that my wife and I are complete opposites, right? For us, it works, and I think that's another thing that, because you had mentioned, like, when you did the seminar here about how you're gonna teach us about how people can match and who are more compatible. I think my wife and I, it works very well because she's a great role player, being a phlegmatic, and I'm obviously it's in my nature to lead and take that lead spot, and so for us it works in that way. But yeah,
But it'll also work because y'all both share the common denominator of melancholic.
yeah,
So that's what I usually teach when I'm doing marriage counseling or any team building, or even when you work for somebody. The fact, your opposites attract, right? You're attracted to her phlegmatic side because she has a compassion you don't have. She has a heart you don't have. She has a chill side you sometimes may not have. She's attracted to your choleric side because you're a go-getter or something she doesn't have.
that
um,
makes sense.
you're more aggressive, you're more confrontational, something that in some cases she may not have or wish she had, or etc.
Yeah.
So those things. But when you fight, those similarities are what you throw in each other's faces.
Mm.
All of a sudden, it turns into, what, you're manipulative.
Yeah, yeah,
No, you know what, you're just weak and you're a crybaby. You're lazy.
yeah.
So when we teach that, the similar, which is the melancholic, that is your conflict resolution common ground. So all of your conflict resolution will have to be on that common denominator, which is melancholic. So you will have to resolve conflict through calculated logic, basically,
Hmm.
like, and be transactional about it, black and white and stuff. You're not going to resolve it with your choleric side.
Yep.
You're not going to, because it's going to be just leaning on you and cut her out. Not going to resolve it on the phlegmatic side, because then either one of those is given into the other side.
Yeah.
But on the melancholic side, you guys are going to be able to assess things more logically.
And if we went
So,
towards the sanguine side, it might be kind of like putting a band-aid on the gash.
correct. Yeah, it would be reckless and irresponsible for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always going to have to be on the common denominator. So someone might say, well, what about when a couple doesn't have a common ground? Well, that's a tough one.
It is a tough
That's a
one.
really tough one. Like,
Well, typically it won't even if okay, so like typically if like you even start talking to the person, y'all will eventually learn. You would hope, especially if these people are refined, like okay, they realize that yeah, it's probably not gonna work out. We have different morals, different, ways about living life. Like, we're better off not dating. But if they're not refined or they're a little bit more ignorant to the signs, it might turn into a toxic relationship, you know.
yeah, I mean, in toxic relationships, it could be that, um, it could be, I think that's if we narrow down to two things. It could be one, that we're not meeting on that common ground. So it's not that we don't have a common ground; it's that we don't know how to get there.
Oh, okay.
One, but we have it. Or the opposite, the next example would be that we don't have a common ground. And so we dealt, my wife and I, we dealt with one couple that absolutely did not have that common ground, and it did result in divorce.
Yeah.
It's not saying that it will always happen, because then you get involved with nature versus nurture, and something can be nurtured, right? But in this case, it had been so long; they had gone through what, like five, six different therapists, and it was just not working.
Yeah, and
So,
an intentional nurturement again comes down to discipline, and it's a lot harder to attain, right? So it's like if we're
yeah,
complete opposites, but we need to meet in the melancholic side. We have to in order to resolve this. That's going to take a lot more um, discipline, a lot more work to attain than us going to our natures, right? Or like
correct,
if our common
correct. So, like
denominator
with
was
you and
like,
your wife, you just have to go to your common denominator. It's
mm-hmm,
something you already have.
yeah,
So that's just where you resolve conflict. So if somebody, so that helps in dating. I mean, for teenagers, someone looking for a relationship. So in your case, like, let's see, you're choleric, melancholic. So anything connected to a melancholic would have worked, but also anything connected to a choleric would have worked. So you could have like worked with like a sanguine choleric. I mean,
Yeah.
but then y'all's platform would have been the choleric, so there would have been a lot more blows. You'd have had a couple of black eyes.
No, yeah. I think that the dating aspect of the whole temperaments really gets that's probably like the more clickbaity side, right? Um
Yeah.
I think it is important to know, like, for the young people that are gonna like start dating. I think this is a pretty interesting thing to to learn. But
And
unfortunately,
also when you're going to college, when you're finding a job, that's compatible to your profile. You might want a certain job because you think that's a good job, but if it doesn't fit your temperament, you can still do it, right? But it's just going to take you a lot longer to adapt, and it's not going to be using who your nature is. So certain fields of study, and then also certain jobs, basically.
yeah, this is why I think that they need to add some type of psychology curriculum to the high school curriculum. Like, there's none. Like, when I went to high school, there was no really like I I mean, unless
So,
I didn't know of it, but
well, no, I actually in one of our business trainings we talk about. I'll send it to you later. Define, learn, do, and I use another version of it, but then one of our new business partners in Pennsylvania, he we were talking, and then he was like, "Man, have you ever heard of define, learn, do?" And when he explained it, I've heard other versions of it, but it was so simple the way he explained it. So we had him on one of our Zoom trainings, and essentially the concept is that in school they don't want you to define upfront who you are and who you want to be or where you want to go. The thing is, so imagine this: define, learn, do. They want you to do just go to school, learn, and then later define who you will be. And it doesn't work that way because all of a sudden we're learning at different. Imagine the four temperaments in your classroom.
yeah.
We're all learning the same dumb book the same way by a cookie cutter teacher who only teaches like one method. um, I mean, I know, and no disrespect to teachers. I mean, I'm sure a lot of. I know some teachers, and they like to really learn their students and figure out how they learn. But I'm just speaking for myself from the teachers I had. Like they didn't customize their methodology to the student. I mean, I read sometimes teacher friends that they post, and they're so passionate about learning the individual learning style. I also like in when I've done interpreting, I've interpreted for the school district and on parent teacher conferences, and I mean with their counselors. Like sometimes I'm on a call and there's like three counselors, five teachers, two types of principals, and like a social worker. And on those, I do see how they care so much about the individual learning style. But I think traditionally, in past times or how we were brought up, all the students are being taught like one way, and it's not landing. So, anyways, this concept that I'm trying to explain to you goes into define, learn, do, which is the opposite of how the system works.
Mm,
First, define what you want to be, then learn whatever it is to get you to who you want to be defined as, and then you put it into action.
mm.
And traditional school system works the opposite.
I just learned that actually. Tony Robbins, which I'm sure you know who that is, right? Tony Robbins,
Yeah,
motivational
yeah, yeah.
speaker. He talked about patterns recently. It's on this tour that he's going on, and he talks about life is about patterns, right? And you need to do three things with patterns. You need to learn them. You need to sorry. What was the what was the learned?
Define.
Yeah, so it was you need to learn them, define them, and then create them, which is kind of like the same,
Yeah,
pattern that you're talking about. And he talks about like this is what the great minds, the creators do. They figure this pattern out before anybody else, and so they're ahead of the game, right? But
yeah.
yeah,
So and notice it ends up being last on the do on the take action. And then like traditional school system is just like, no, just do. You like just go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then there's like no precision, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, because they even start handing you like these silly, uh, like career projectile assessments, like super.
Yeah. So
I
you
know
start
one
like,
guy that lived here. Like his career path was being a professional snowboarder. It's like, bro, we live in the valley. What's that?
man, way off, you know. No, but yeah, I get you. So sometimes, so I guess when we're kids, like we're just picking stuff out of it could be anything out of interest, like peak of interest, you know, like, oh, I want to be that. Oh, that sounds cool, you know. And
Mm,
I remember being a kid, you just pick junk, right?
yeah.
I want to be a firefighter, you know, jack about. I mean, it was attractive what you saw or what you heard about it.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, as you grow up, I mean, even in private schools, I think private schools are a little more defined or certain like I don't know. I'm not 100% educated on the how the full education system works, but more like I know there's some schools like there's a school of some kids that I've mentored that automatically there's like a CNA program in there that you kind of come out as a CNA or whatever. So and they fast track you. I think they try to squeeze in like a whole year. It's for kids who like are not making it.
Mm,
Um and you go there and in a few months you can knock out a whole year like
oh wow.
less than and so they're gonna fast track them as a CNA or something. I mean, there's other prep schools where they're here in Houston where they're focusing like on a certain type. So like if you want your kid to go that way, like they're more defined. That's really my point.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Versus
some
a
of those
normal
here.
public school.
There's some of those here, like the medical skill, like medical focused schools. Like it's still middle school, high school, but they prepare them for the medical field.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have some
Or
of
there's
those here.
like in the Northeast, I forget the name of it, but they in the Northeast in New Hampshire, took a tour of this school. It's like this elite school, dude. Like I think Mark Zuckerberg went there, and there's like a ton of people throughout history that have gone there. But pretty much anyone that goes to that school, they're gonna be fast tracked into Ivy League schools. So
Mm,
that's still a form of defining. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, I think one of the problems is with like teachers, and I'm talking about like public school teachers, like being personal and then like identifying your students isn't really incentivized, like especially with the whole, curriculum that's being pushed. Like it's a pretty generic curriculum, and I know of teachers that can get in trouble for even going against the curriculum or teaching more than what the curriculum has offered them to teach. I know some people that are teachers now that say it's like a struggle sometimes because it's like they can't do certain things, or it's like you're stepping on icy water by tackling a certain issue in the class because you could possibly maybe even offend somebody, or lose your job over something dumb.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I do know just based on the calls I would have to take, like I mean, I was just on the follow up side of it as an interpreter,
Hmm.
but and I do it with schools around the whole country. But like, I guess when a kid is in trouble or falling off, like, man, it's a very complex system that they use. Now there is some better than others. Some schools, obviously, depending on the school district, have better systems than others, maybe based on their funding or what level teachers they attract or whatever. Um, but it's super complex, and I think the the factor that it's still kind of you have no control over is the parent. Doesn't matter how amazing the system is, if you still have a parent who doesn't care, then it's kind of like a wasted resource sometimes.
Yeah.
But I mean, they're still trying, right? And I think it's funny because I mean we're on a Zoom call right now, but I think when these kids were in Zoom school, I think it made parents realize how complicated it was because now they had to do stuff for the kid,
Mm,
so they were like, what? So, and I remember, I don't know if you remember all those memes, but where like parents are being the teachers now and they have to do all this stuff. There was a lot of
yeah, yeah,
funny stuff of, well, how come the parents don't get paid? And then the teachers are
yeah,
like, well, this is what we've been doing the whole time, kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So yeah, it gets super complicated. But yeah, I have, since I did take calls like that for like the whole country pretty much, I could see the different methodologies and systems in place that vary depending on the region or whatever. Some more sophisticated than others, some more thorough than others. And then, but the common factor a lot was the parent not understanding the system, not understanding the purpose of the system. Some people even rejecting like the
Mhm.
system, being bothersome or whatever. When I mean the teachers and the counselors. I mean, it kind of sucks because I mean, imagine having, dude, some of these calls would last 3 4 hours. And about one kid, and they got to do that with all of them for whatever
Yeah.
reason. So
Yeah, I think I talked about this on another podcast where I think it's important for, or I think that a lot of issues or great things happen all at the home, like the source of everything starts at home, right? And kind of going back into temperaments, I think it's important that parents, I don't know, like it's kind of weird saying this, but like, but at least that parents or more people are aware of temperaments, just to know that why, to answer the big question of why do these people act a certain way or why don't they act like me, right? And it's to realize
yeah.
that we have different temperaments, and that although they're not like me, they can provide good service.
So you mean like it's important, like parents should understand it?
Well, everybody, yes, but yeah, parents,
Yeah,
because
but as parents, yeah, I think as parents for sure. I see it a lot when we do family counseling
hmm
or advocating for kids. Whether it's sometimes on the advocating side, where we're working with the teachers, counselors, or the parents. Something dealing from a kid dropping out and the parents being okay with it, or
hmm
a teacher saying, "I'm done with this kid, like get him out of my class," and we're going like, "I don't have those problems with that kid." So
yeah,
there's different situations, but yeah, it does help a lot when people understand the temperaments because then we understand the action.
yeah,
You know, we dealt with this. What was he? What was he 4 years old at the time? He was 4 years old at the time, bro, and the teacher was done with him. The teacher, now, I don't think I personally met like a 65-year-old kindergarten teacher ever. Like, I don't know. I guess my teachers were always younger than that,
yeah,
but I could just imagine, bro, like the pain that this gentleman was going through because I had a mentorship group for at-risk teenagers, no teenagers, and this 4 year old would participate in it along with his older siblings
okay,
because he was beyond awake in life. Like,
mm.
and it was so funny because he didn't see himself as a 4 year old kid. So he would refer to other kids as kids, but
Oh wow,
somehow not see himself like that. So we would joke and like, "Hey man, how come you don't invite your friends?" Like, it was like, "No, they're kids. What?" Like, you know. And so he always did socially, like when we would see him interact, um, he was like a natural leader of 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds. So they'd
hmm
follow him, and his conversation level and his backstory is that he was a crack baby. Like when he was born, he was like already, from my understanding, like addicted to crack. So they had complications with him at birth and stuff. But this kid was super smart, man. And so I get called into to the school one day, and they had my information in there. Like his parents had signed off on it and stuff like that. So the mom calls me like, "Look, we're at the school. Can you come help because you understand him better, and can you teach him what you do And so I didn't. I just thought it was just gonna be like a normal meeting, and like with maybe one school person. Dude, it was like the principal, vice principal. There was a counselor there. The nurse was there. A parent was there. One of the aunts was there, and then the teacher. And that's where I met this 65-year-old gentleman. And so the story was that he is stuck on the iPad. They had iPads in the classroom,
Okay.
and he takes the iPad and he runs around the class, and doesn't drop the iPad. And the iPad is only for a designated time. And but when he runs around the classroom, he's running on the desks, like from desk to desk.
Uh huh.
So obviously that's interfering with the other kids, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's their workspace or whatever. And he was so angry, man. The guy was like literally overwhelmed. Like I was like, man, what did this kid do? And when he told me, um, so he starts kind of role playing how he talks to the kid, and then and he didn't like me, I guess, because I mean he saw me as younger, and he was like, I've been teaching for over 30 something years, and
Yeah.
I don't know what you can tell me, but this kid is passive aggressive and whatever, and he was using like all these terminology or whatever. And I said, look, man, I don't know your experience. I said, but yeah, I mean, I'm not a teacher, but I've been dealing with this kid on a more personal level for a year and a half. So this is your first semester with him. So technically, I have more experience with him than you do. You might have more experience teaching, right? I said, but I've never had the problems you're having, like with him. And I believe what you're having, with him. I could see that happening, but I've never had that. So I said, I don't know what you're doing wrong. I
You're
said,
the problem.
and yeah, so then it turns out the simple fix, bro, was this. The simple fix, and it was a fix that the group of leaders that I had developed over here on this community program with him, that was the rule. You don't talk to him like a kid. You
Mm.
talk to him like he's grown,
Mm.
like because he was so little, bro. And you like, hey, buddy, you just feel inclined to talk to him like that. And he didn't take that, bro. Like
Mm.
you just had to talk to him straight, and he'd respond. So like he was using the fact that you're treating him like as a little kid to act up, you
Mm.
know, and 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 so it got to the point where, okay, we solved that. He stopped doing that. The teacher stopped doing that. And then the next time, all it was like, you know what? They call him out by his name. You know what? I'm gonna call your mentor. And that was it. That's all they had to say. Like they just had to be transactional with him,
Mm.
and be straight and not talk to him like a little kid. And so that's what fixed it. And so I remember I'd get called multiple times. I mean, obviously he's not gonna correct that overnight. Um, they'd call me, and sometimes when he was being like really messed up all over the class, you would hear like I have him on the phone, and you just hear him, nah, and he'd figure out the pattern. But then we would reward him and stuff like that. But I guess the point is there. You just had to talk to him straight. That's it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing how certain kids are more advanced than others, right? Because that's not.
Hmm.
Do you think that's a nurturement or do you think that's nature? I have a niece that she's extremely advanced. She knows English and Spanish. She knows all of her
Hmm.
ABCs. Um, she knows that she can count up to 100, and she's only 3, and but she's known this for a while, right? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
snap! Like, what's going on there?
I mean, without like being like so in depth on it, I have seen a pattern, which is I always would see this pattern. Like I think it's how you talk to them again.
Mm,
Like it boils down to that, how you talk to them since they're a kid, and because they're so cute and whatever, we tend to baby talk them, right? But like I have family that grew up in Mexico, and they were never baby talked, and they were talked like full blown sentences right off the bat. So they developed that really, really, really young,
mm.
you know.
Yeah, but it's weird
Versus
how
I've had,
it's weird how you can have two kids out of the same family or the same household, but
hmm
their development level is is different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 for sure. And then that would go like what we were talking about earlier, like what if parents could tweak the methodology and not be cookie cuttering their kids, you know?
Mm,
You cookie cutter your kids, you're doing a disservice to one of them,
that is true as well.
if not both, because you're cookie cuttering against your own nature and not
Mm,
according to either of them, you
mm,
know. But I mean that boils down in discipline. What's discipline to one is not discipline to both. You know,
yeah,
what's rewarding to one is not rewarding to both,
yeah,
depending on their temperament.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it does help. A lot of times, it's not like parents know some of this stuff through trial and error, but not maybe not as specific. You know, but sometimes like when I have like we do family counseling sessions or whatever, the parent were like, "Oh yeah, that's what I do," but they maybe just never put it into that verbiage or whatever. But it might be something they already figured out or were taught by their parent, etc.
Yeah, because you'll hear parents say
Yeah,
like, "Oh, he's the crazy one. He's the quiet one. He's the competitive one." Right? You kind of, oh, he's the
yeah,
crybaby. We hear that a lot, and that's at the very, very, very surface level of what temperaments is about.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, whether you know about it or not, or educated about it or not, I mean, you still exposed to all those factors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the question I think for me would be like, are you paying attention to those factors and noticing patterns, and what are you doing with those patterns and those
Mm-hmm.
factors that you notice?
No,
Yeah.
that's good. Well, I appreciate you, man. We're about an hour and 23 minutes in. This is the longest podcast I've had in a while, but it's a
Oh
good one.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good
It's
one.
still shorter than our other ones.
Yeah, the other one was like 3 hours, right? That
Yeah,
was
dude.
crazy. But I think I'm gonna call it a wrap there.
Cool,
I
man.
think that was good enough. But I appreciate you, man. Like always, and it was good talking to you. I know we've talked several times on the phone, but not this long, and it's good to catch up. And I'm glad to see that you're doing good, and we'll talk soon.
Likewise, man. You take care, bro. Say hi to Sarah first.
Yes, we will.
Later.
Yeah, on the track.